Hey folks, this podcast goes beyond the saddle as we explore professional careers across the equine industry. I'm your host, Katie Kleinbell. Let's tack up and head out. Erin Clemm Ochoa is the Chief Executive Officer of Days End Farm Horse Rescue, based in Woodbine, Maryland, and has been with the organization since 2005. Each year alone, her role at Days End Farm Horse Rescue has given her the opportunity to work with and on behalf of hundreds of horses in transition. As a Maryland native, Erin grew up active in the equine industry and was involved with Pony Club and the Potomac Valley Dressage Association. Her career in equine welfare has also led her to become certified as an equine investigator and animal control officer, and she also serves as a member of Maryland Professional Animal Workers Association, a board member representing associations of the Maryland Horse Council, a board member representing Humane Societies of the Maryland Horse Industry Board, and an advisory council member of the Homes for Horses Coalition. Days End Farm Horse Rescue is a member of A Home for Every Horse. This episode is brought to you by the Equine Network's A Home for Every Horse program. Erin, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This will be super fun. We're going to start by getting to know you a little bit and playing our game. So go ahead and read your 2 truths and 1 lie in any order, and I'm going to see if I can guess which one is the lie.
Okay. So I'm going to say we, meaning Days End, where I work. We only service the state of Maryland. We don't rescue horses, and we care for over 100 horses per year.
Well, I know you rescue horses, so that has to be your lie. Right?
That is actually one of my truths. It's kind of maybe a trick question.
You are tricky. Okay, tell me more.
I was talking about this the other day, and it's very misleading because, when we started this rescue back in 1989 here at Days End, our founders were actually going out and finding horses that needed to be rescued, and we're working with owners and taking those horses in. And over the years, Days End has evolved a little bit more to really supporting the counties that are going out and rescuing the horses and taking them directly from owners. So we only work with animal control agencies, sheriff's office, state police, who are out actually working with the community members, and they're actually rescuers, and we're the rehabilitators and, sort of supporting that transition from a neglected state into hopefully one that is healthy and is able to ultimately go out and find a new home. So I consider us rehabilitators versus rescuers at this point.
Gotcha. That is a very important distinction. Okay, that makes lots of sense. Talk to me about kind of the counties and the states and so forth that you do serve.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we found with the counties is that one, they don't want to take anybody's horses, that's for sure. So their job is to really go out and help educate and provide resources for owners who are having difficulty caring for their animals. But when that can't happen, intervention's required. And so they have to step in and unfortunately take people's property. Most of these shelters have space for their cats and dogs, but they don't have any space for large animals. And they also don't have the staff to be able to care or have the, skill sets to be able to take care of horses. So it became really challenging for them. And that was sort of the light bulb that started Days End, was saying, this is a real need. There's counties who aren't able to go out and execute these removal of horses. And sometimes you're not talking about 1 or 2 horses. Sometimes you're talking about 20 or 40 or 50 horses or more. So that becomes a real challenge for resources. And a lot of these officers, they may have experience with handling cats and dogs in their community, but have never touched a horse. And so it's very intimidating for somebody. And we do a lot of training to go out and figure out, like, how do I even assess this horse or touch this horse, much less put it on a horse trailer and get it off somebody's property. So they really have come to rely on Days End as being a key partner with them to facilitating, answering questions about, is what I'm seeing something that I should be concerned about? Or how do I talk to an owner about maybe changing the situation to ultimately maybe having to remove the horses and to rehabilitate the horses at our farm? And that's a big piece of what we ultimately help them with, taking to court, is, providing that necessary rehabilitation and care, and then going in and serving as a witness for the county on our role and ultimately the transition that the horse is able to make from what it was receiving at the owner's home to the basic necessities that were required for the horse to transition into this new state of health, and showing a judge, exactly what that took. And now what it requires is to maintain that.
Sure. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. That gave us good perspective of it too, because it is a much larger picture, right, than just going and getting the horses and getting them back to health, because there's a lot more that goes on beyond that, right? There's a lot of like tumbling blocks that kind of happen, lots of ripples that you help take care of on the legal side, on the horse side, with the county. That's a big puzzle.
Absolutely.
For sure. Okay, well, let's back up a little bit and give some background. So what is Days End Farm? And just give us sort of like the origin story so that people can get a feel for where you started and what it is now.
Yeah, so we were founded in 1989. Kathy Schwartz-Howell and her then husband, Alan Schwartz, were looking for something for their son to get involved in who had some disabilities. And they ended up finding that he really loved to take horseback riding lessons at this therapeutic barn, and slowly started getting into horses because of him and learning about it. I admire our founders. They didn't get started into horses until probably their late 30s, early 40s, when they really got into building this rescue. But they started to see some neglected horses in their barn and started talking to owners about, hey, could I care for this horse for you? And from there, a local animal control agent came and said, if you're going to start taking people's horses, you really need to learn the law. And from there, they became just immersed in learning about, this whole process of the law side of, neglecting an animal and the consequences to that, and how to facilitate and help animals that they were seeing in their community that really needed to be helped. And from there, what I love about it is she inspired an entire community to join her board of directors, form this nonprofit, come and feed and groom and care for horses, and quickly built this rescue up to being able to help at the beginning, maybe just a handful of horses a year, to now us sheltering, over 30 years later, over 100 horses a year that we're sheltering at Days End. So, the needs started in this very grassroots, way, from a husband and a wife and their whole family getting involved, and their neighbors and their friends being inspired by the work that they were doing, and just grew into this place now that we facilitate so many volunteers coming through, and so many horses and people, and education's become much more of a focus for us over the past decade than it had been at the beginning. But for me, I really admire that they really stayed true to their mission from what they wanted to accomplish at the beginning, and over 30 years later, that still remains true.
And you are a big piece of that too. So talk to us about what is your role with the organization and how has that evolved? Because I'm sure that's had a journey all in and of itself.
So I feel so blessed because I wanted to start my own nonprofit, and I actually did. Went through the whole formal process of starting, and I wanted to get into therapeutic, equine mental health, and figuring out how to help people with horses. And so, growing up in the horse industry, unlike my founder, horses were a huge part of my life, from the show world's perspective of things. And it was my intention to continue that in some way, and try to monetize it so that could be my life, and I could still, pay my mortgage and, do all of the things that us adults need to do. And I quickly discovered that starting a nonprofit is it's really hard. It takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of just giving up your own personal, life. And I needed to help sort of pay the bills. And I saw an ad for Days End Farm, and I had some background in being able to care for horses. So I answered the ad thinking that I would do this for maybe 6 months while I was getting things going. And within 3 months of starting there as their farm manager, it was instantly to me that this was the place for me. It had all of the things that I wanted in life, as far as and a piece of teaching, and the vet side of things, and the business side of things. And I also saw that the organization was at a place that it was ready just to take off and grow. And I think that what Days End needed, I was bringing, and 17 years later, I've been there with them for that long. I think I was able to sort of help them go to the next stage. And I think they were able to help me sort of figure out, where I wanted to be in my career as well.
I love when that happens, right? When it's not just circumstance, like they needed you, you needed them, and like the timing was just perfect.
Yeah. And so as I grew with the organization from just working in the barn and overseeing, the day-to-day operations, I then took over doing all of the court side of things, where I was managing the casework and going to court and, learning that aspect of how I needed to really think through how I could better support the horse through my testimony and through my ability to, understand what was needed of me and my record keeping and things like that. And then our founder decided that she was going to retire, and the board of directors decided to go ahead and move me into an assistant position for her, as at that time, the assistant executive director. And I really then started to look at the organization completely different, because now I was starting to dabble into, okay, how do we make this whole thing work? Meaning, how do you pay to keep the lights on every day? And started really talking more to donors and seeing more of the side of running the business. And when our founder retired, then our board went ahead and elected to bring me on as the CEO. So that was probably, I guess, going on 8 years now that I've been in that role. And I think it's a very unique thing that I feel very blessed in my career that I got to see all facets of it, because, where the farm is now, if I were to leave Days End Farm, I know that they would do, an executive search, for a CEO to come in, because, what's needed at my position now is much different than what was needed even 10 years ago. So really feel blessed that I know what it's like to be down there cleaning the barn. And I also know what it's like to have to lead the whole organization to make sure we're getting to where we need to go in 30 years from now.
Sure. Well, that makes you a stronger leader because you have seen it all the way through. I just want to say I love your journey because you've already busted a misconception that I think a lot of people might have about horse rescues and organizations like that. I mean, your work and the fact that, like you just said, like they would go out and do an executive search. It's much more, I think, elevated professionally than I think maybe the industry looks at, running a horse business might look like. So I love that you talked us through that, because I think you've already busted that myth and you are proof of it.
Yeah. And, it's, horse rescue, the traditional sense of it. And there are, when I describe to you what we do at Days End is we don't really rescue horses, meaning we don't go out and take them from an auction house and rescue them from going off to slaughter. We don't go out and, take them off of someone's property, but there are, as we look at rescues that, I work with and do consultations with throughout the country, there's a lot of different types of horse rescue out there. 70% of horse rescues fail in the first 3 years of starting. So the fact that Days End has been around for over 30 and was able to make that leap from a founder to their next CEO and keep the organization going, it's pretty uncommon in the horse welfare space. I think you'll see it becoming more and more relevant as the industry continues to professionalize itself. But, a lot of people start horse rescues because it's a passion that they have. They start it in their backyard or with some of their friends, and they find a way to fund it. And that then slowly turns into a business. But ultimately, that's the key word, is it has to turn from a hobby to a business if you really want it to be sustainable and grow.
Absolutely true. So true. Do you have another common misconception that people might have about what your job is, and can we bust it?
I will say that I don't underappreciate just the simplicity and the feeling of like going down and just cleaning out a barn and it's done, right? You clean a stall and it looks great and it's like a done task. And in my job now, it's very hard to get that satisfaction of a done task anymore, because there's so many layers to this job that it's hard to just be like, yeah, I'm done with that thing for the day and moving on. So never underappreciate the littler things. It's kind of like mowing your lawn, right? You get done and it looks great, and but then it just grows back, just like our stalls get messy again. But
So true. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And that's 100% true. I think as people get that bigger picture, you think, man, okay, this is done, but now I have 6,000 other things, or, now it snowballs into this. I hear you.
Definitely learning how to multitask. And, I think of my job sometimes as looking like at a big, huge, like, grid board of all of these blinking lights. And it's learning what lights I need to pay attention to at what time and which ones I need to sort of just keep blinking because they're not blinking maybe as bright. So that's kind of how I see in my day to day.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's a perfect visual. That's the secret sauce, though, is figuring that out, which one needs you.
Yes.
We talked about your journey to join Days End Farm. Prior to that, you talked about wanting to start a nonprofit. So kind of what was your journey? What were you doing before then that led you to that space?
I grew up doing pony club and, went into the Dressage Association and really enjoyed the show world of things. And I have to be honest, growing up in a world without social media, it didn't really expose me to a lot of things that my 15-year-old daughter gets exposed to in a much quicker way. So I didn't know that people neglected horses. It was something that it was just, I guess, maybe I was very sheltered or something in my life and my experience in the equine industry, but I had seen skinny horses. But to be honest, when we would go to auctions to find projects, sometimes skinnier horses were seen as like, oh, we can take those home and fatten them up and flip them really quick. And so I have a much different relationship with horses now doing this job for sure. But I didn't see my first neglected horse until I was in my 20s. And my dad there was a horse that was down the street from my home. And he said, oh, it's an off the track thoroughbred that they're looking to get rid of. Let's go down and look at it. And we went. It was a very skinny horse, which I now recognize as that horse needed me to call an animal control agency in my county and say this horse needed help. I left there thinking, okay, that horse is sick. There's something wrong with that horse. We don't want that horse. And I was a college educated, smart person. And that sort of kind of continues to inspire me, is to say, let's not assume that everybody knows what to do when they see a neglected horse, or that horse is not sick. That horse is actually neglected. It didn't fathom me that somebody would, just not feed a horse.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, let's take this moment then to tell people, what should they do, right? Let's do a little educating right here, right now, if you don't mind, Erin.
Well, gosh, if I had picked up the phone and just called and just, kind of the see something, say something, I could have changed that horse's entire life. I have no idea whatever happened to that horse. For all I know, it could have died a couple of days later, or, they could have sold it and somebody could have, done something. But, the key thing is, in my experience, I think a lot of people are afraid, thinking, if I call this in, my neighbor's going to find out. Or the animal control, in my experience, they genuinely want to go out and help the person find a solution for their animal and help them take care of it. That's that. So instead of looking at it as you're going to get somebody in trouble, really look at it as you're trying to help somebody, give them a resource that they might not know about or not even know that they need. So maybe that person was having financial trouble, and if they could have found some safety net programs, they could have gotten that horse some help themselves. And maybe, we have seen where a lot of these cases turn into, there's people intervention that's actually needed. We'll have somebody going out to read an electric meter, see something with animals, and calls it in, and the next thing the owner's able to get resources for things that are helping not only the animals eat, but them eat. So really, looking at it as, this is you helping that person and that animal kind of find solutions to the situation that they're in. So definitely just letting somebody know is probably the key thing that you can do.
For sure. No, that's great. And kind of keeping in mind that larger socioeconomic picture, right? Your love for horses is your gateway, right? You want to help that animal. But maybe you said help for that animal isn't actually removing the animal from that situation necessarily. Maybe it's let's help the owner, let's help the human, and have best case scenario for both.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. I love that. As sad as it is to think about that image of that horse, but from that horse, fast forward now to all the hundreds of horses that you see every year that you help with. He planted that seed in you, and now it's blossomed into this big, beautiful thing, all because of the passion that was inspired by that one moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
A Home for Every Horse is a resource for 501c3 rescues, sanctuaries, and care facilities. Its mission is to provide support for these organizations through the program's many sponsors and equine network resources. By partnering with the Unwanted Horse Coalition, A Home for Every Horse is dedicated to bridging the gap between rescue organizations and those who can assist them. Brighten your days by following A Home for Every Horse on Facebook and Instagram, and head on over to ahomeforeveryhorse.com to find rescues near you and heartfelt success stories to brighten your day.
Yeah, so I think as we continue to grow as Days End, what we found that was really the key piece of making sort of how do you take equine welfare to the next level, and it really is it's so centered and seated in education. And we decided to be kind of a point of entry organization, and I think that it is really unique for Days End in our industry is to let anybody. I mean, if you come to our organization, 1,200 people come through our farm every year just to volunteer. And of the 80% of those people are brand new to horses. They've never even touched a horse before, but they're inspired in some way to get involved. And, we allow that. We don't say, you have to be experienced to come to Days End. And so that means that we have to have a focus of educating at Days End. Everything that we do is centered around training up our staff, training up our volunteers, and really being a place that people feel that they can ask questions, that they have a space that they can, make a mistake and, still remain safe or to continue to learn. And so, the education is happening on a day-to-day basis with our volunteers, but then also in a more formal way by offering a lot of classes at our farm. And, that's sort of the next step for Days End as we continue to grow, is to continue to build on those offerings and to continue to bring in more and more of the public. So expanding, we're open for tours every single day of the week. And I have yet to meet another horse rescue who can say the same. They actually look at me like I'm crazy when we say that we're open every single day for tours. It's crazy because most of the time you want that to be more structured or, set up in a way that you kind of know when to expect people. And we have no idea. People can just drive by our farm and stop in and say, hey, I want to see what's going on here today. And we will stop what we're doing and find somebody to take you around and show you. And so having that level of transparency with the public and being a farm that wants to be open and, at the end of the day, this is not my farm. This is the community's farm. This is the community's work. And that's a really important aspect that we want to continue to grow as we go into this next, decade, is really expanding on making us even more accessible to the public, and not only here in Maryland, but all over the world.
That is a beautiful vision. It really is. And I hope it inspires people to get engaged, right? To reach out and have those conversations with you guys or with their own local horse rescue so that they can get involved like that. But also I hope it inspires other organizations like yourself to have that same level of transparency and that same level of vision. Because I think you're right. Like if the public has a safe space to come to ask those hard questions and to, see those horses or those animals that are in that hard point of transition, it raises that level of awareness. We can all do better for each other, right? Collectively.
Yeah. Well, and the horse industry can be intimidating if we're honest with each other. Like it is.
Yes.
It's not something, I was lucky I grew up in it, but, I know our founder, getting started in her 40s, really struggled to be like, why are you doing this? Like you don't have horse experience. And so, she really had to humble herself and work with people and listen, to the vets and read tons of books. And, think that coming in to this organization for her is a complete, I'm not a horse person. And to start something like this, I think really just became a foundation for what the organization wanted to achieve even today. So being that what I call a point of entry organization, I think is super important for businesses to consider. How do you engage people and into your farm? And a lot of these people who come to us won't stay with us. We know that. Being point of entry is saying, here's a place to set a good example, to see how it should be done, and then ultimately go out into the industry and continue to grow your skills. But hopefully they've now seen a way of doing things or how horses should be cared for or treated that, builds their own foundation in a very, equine welfare, humane way that will continue to grow and into other areas of the industry over time.
Sure. Yeah, it actually helps the industry more, right? If they come and they learn and they see and then they go and do themselves, like that's really cool, rather than just keeping all those good folks to yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about you and your professional journey. I mean, you have some serious clout there. So do you have advice for anyone that might be looking to land in a similar place, leading an organization like this? What advice would you give to someone like that?
I will say it's more important that I understand business than it is horses. So knowing horses is obviously very important in running a horse rescue, but it's not the most important thing. So me, self-educating or formally educating myself in the business world is probably what is helping me be most successful in my job. I was lucky that I had taken business classes in college. I had a basic understanding of, even just how to use Excel is like such a skill set that, will help you be, a leader in your organization. But I was lucky that I ended up going through a certified public manager's course, which was an 18-month course at the University of Baltimore. And it really set me up for understanding how to, manage teams or to write, grants and, continue to grow my skill sets that will make me a better leader and, a better business person. But so that would definitely be the key is if you can't get the formal education, just start devouring business podcasts and blogs and, to see how entrepreneurs have been able to grow some incredible businesses. There's so much out there now. You just take these little nuggets here and there and, you keep putting them into your own company and, you really see things take off. So I would recommend just really immerse yourself in the business side.
It's amazing too, how many free resources there are like that. Like if you're dedicated and you just search Google, like it's amazing what you can find to help you learn those skills.
I 100% agree. I think, college was sort of, the place that you had to go, but nowadays there's so much more. Not to say that college isn't very important because, it is, but it's certainly, I probably learned way more from just really seeing how other people were doing things and getting inspired and taking ideas and running with them.
Sure. And like kind of continuing education yourself, you know what I mean? Like college is great to give you that foundation, but then to really get niche and like figure out ways like, all right, I'm in this Excel sheet. I know that I need it to manage X, Y, or Z, but gosh, there's got to be a functionality, right? So like Googling it, learning it, watching a video on it, something like that, just to keep your skills fresh and like just to really dive into it. Sometimes it's a lot easier after college to learn those minute things because you know how you need to apply it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely gone onto YouTube to figure out how to do things. So yeah, it's a good hack for sure.
Yeah. In your own words, I'd love to know what you consider to be an equine industry professional. You have a very unique perspective on this because of where you came from and where Days End Farm was founded, right? By someone who wasn't necessarily a horse person, but now I would consider an equine industry professional. So I'd love your take on that.
Yeah, I think it's someone who's working to advance the equine industry. We have to be an industry that's consistently, growing and looking at new ways of doing things. And we are definitely, in my opinion, in, the technology revolution right now. And so you have to continue to evolve with it. I think somebody is that they're advancing the equine industry if they're a professional in it.
Yes, love that. That is simple and beautiful. Absolutely. So if you feel that relates to you people, I'm just telling you, you're an equine industry professional. We're all in this together. Well, let's talk about horses. Everybody wants to talk about horses. So do you have horses personally, or do you just love all the ones you get to be with at the farm?
So when I started working at Days End, I had 5. I now have none. So it's funny when you're in the industry, I think, one, I have access to 80 horses every single day to go down and, see and love and, be around. So I'm around horses every single day. But horse ownership looks so much different to me now than it used to, because working with horses and seeing them in transition states, it makes me feel if I were to get another horse that I would have to make like a really big commitment to that horse for the rest of its life. So for me, I think finding other ways to be, for myself, engaged with horses, or my daughter who's 15, whether it's leasing horses or finding, barns where you can go and you can participate and really learn about horses. But, at 15, she wants her own horse. And I'm like, you can make that decision later when you can make that decision for yourself for the next, 20, 30 years. But it's just it's because I'm seeing so many horses coming out of neglected states, and horses that we've gone back and tracked that had owners 2 or 3 times before they landed into this spot, that genuinely loved these animals, so it's hard for me now in this job to sort of not think longer term with horses than the today.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I imagine so. And I love, I want to talk about your daughter for a minute, because I was that crazy. I think I got my first serious show horse when I was 13, who I still have today and I love dearly. But I don't know, as a parent, you want to do that, right? You want to give them that experience and all those things. But now I have this, 30-year-old horse that I love, and I will make sure she, has a day to be happy till the day she dies. But I didn't make that choice when I was 13. You know what I mean? It's a long journey together. And sometimes people forget.
My parents got me into horses, and I think my dad spent a small fortune to keep me away from boys as a teenager. And, that was sort of his motivation, and it worked out great. And I was so appreciate that they gave me that experience, because it built a lifelong love for horses. It was something that, I will be forever grateful for, that I had that experience. And, for my daughter, I was pregnant at Days End Farm. So she literally, has been a part of this horse rescue experience her entire life. Well, probably in, 20 years from now, when she's reflecting on her relationships with horses, we'll see it much differently than I did, because she's seen horses coming in very bad conditions since she was a little girl. So I think it's amazing just the relationship that horses have with people is amazing. When you really think about it, the fact that they'll allow us to have this, predator-prey relationship with them, and to see how much abuse and neglect that they have suffered before they come into Days End sometimes, and to still trust us, and to, allow us to catch them and get on them. And, they just have such an amazing soul that, I'm honored to get to work with them every day, and hopefully inspire other people to see the value in taking care of them and making sure that they continue to have a place in our society.
Oh, absolutely. Just thinking about that gives me goosebumps every single time. Well, Erin, this is awesome. I think you've done a really good job painting the picture of what Days End Farm is, and also your role and how it's evolved with the organization and where it continues to go. So thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing that journey with us, and just being an open book. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Yes, of course. I'm sure other people, I'm hoping, are feeling inspired by this, and they may want to reach out, connect with you. What's the best place they can do that?
Definitely come to our website. You can learn all about our programs, how to visit the farm. If you want to get involved either by volunteering or just coming in for a tour, you can read transformation stories, see some of the horses that we have available for adoption. So at DEFHR.org is a way to sort of starting point to see us. We're on Facebook and Instagram, TikTok. We just launched a really fun TikTok channel that our trainers are having fun showing everybody, little snips of things that we're doing at the farm. But we'd love to get connected with you and kind of show you what's going on at the farm, and hopefully inspire you to continue to get involved.
Perfect. That's awesome. Fabulous. And just to wrap it up, I'd love for you to share a closing thought. So food for thought, or maybe your favorite quote, just something you want to leave the audience with, so they look back on this episode. That's how they'll remember you.
I think just figuring out how in your own business, your own career in horses, is how can you inspire somebody else to just care and appreciate horses. You never know where that seed of an inspiration will, take off and flourish. And, whether that's with working with kids or, sharing stories about horses, with your friends and family or neighbors, you never know what's going to kind of click with somebody and ultimately maybe make a big difference in the horse industry.
Thanks for riding along. Know someone that would be great to interview? Have questions you'd like answered on the podcast? Send me an email at beyondthesaddlepodcast@gmail.com or join the conversation on social media. You can connect with us and learn more about the Beyond the Saddle podcast by following us on Facebook and Instagram at Beyond the Saddle Podcast. Find more episodes anywhere that you get your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. Beyond the Saddle is a production of the Equine Podcast Network, an entity of the Equine Network.